Hey bitches, welcome back to my channel. This is Elle with RRozelles Creations, and we are going to be learning how I epoxy. Not everyone else, me. This is how I've taught myself. I tweak it every now and again, but this is what I do for a living. So lots of newbies, lots of questions. Let's get into epoxying a glitter tumbler and an already epoxied tumbler. So for starters, regular or fast set, whichever epoxy you choose to use, make sure you are reading the directions. Make sure you are following the directions. Make sure you are wearing the proper PPE. I know it's all preference, but we are playing with toxic chemicals, whether we want to believe we are or not. We are. So just follow all the precautions. Each epoxy company should have a SDS sheet, which is a safety data sheet, on their website for you to refer to. Now, these are both 24-ounce tumblers. One already has epoxy covering the glitter, one doesn't. So, Elle, how much are we mixing? So, for the glitter tumbler, I am mixing 30 ml, and for the already epoxied, I'm mixing 20. So, altogether, I am mixing 50 ml of epoxy. I am mixing it. They do have specified times to mix it for, but I'm so used to setting a timer, but rarely I listen to the timer. What I am looking for is when my part A and my part B mix, there's going to be no ribbons. It is going to be crystal clear. I don't even worry about micro bubbles, because if you are putting on the correct amount of epoxy, your micro bubbles will escape perfectly fine. If you are putting too much epoxy, that is why you are dealing with micro bubbles. I've learned that over time, and that is why I work each and every time I epoxy to try to get the perfect coat each time, because you don't want all them micro bubbles pooling. So, before I got started mixing my epoxy, I have a little level. And before I start epoxying, I put the level on top of each of my tumblers to make sure that they are absolutely level, not a little bit off, absolutely level. You don't want any pooling at the top or the bottom of your tumblers from your tumbler being unlevel. So I always make sure to level them before I get started. I'm going to speed the process up so we can get to epoxying, but I will mix and mix and mix until my epoxy is crystal clear. So let's get into it. Alright, so for this glitter tumbler, this is 2 coats of glitter, and I sealed it with binding potion, my sealer. I let the binding potion dry, and now we're going to apply about 25 to 30 ml of epoxy over this entire tumbler. Since I have started sealing my glitter with binding potion, I am using less. And as in less, I'm talking 20 to 30 ml less. Having a good sealer allows your epoxy to sit right on top of that glitter and not sink in. When your epoxy sinks into your glitter, that's what causes the lumps, the waves. Not all the time, but you will have to apply quite a few coats to get a smooth surface. So if you have a good sealer, as you can see, the epoxy looks so good on top of this sealed glitter. And once this spins out, I didn't even have to apply a second coat. That is how well this coat of epoxy spun out for me. And that's what usually happens. But if I didn't seal that, I would be adding 30 ml over the glitter, then another coat of 20 to 25 ml, and if it still isn't smooth, I'd add another coat. Sealing eliminates coats and you lose less. I've tested so many different ways. Everybody does it differently, but this is my way and I show it all. I show every step to tumbler making because I want to show the good, the bad, the ugly. I will post mess up because that is how we learn. Once I get the amount of epoxy that I want on this tumbler, I will start at the bottom of the tumbler from the top to the bottom, going all the way up to the top rim, and I will take off the excess like I'm doing right now. I am pushing the epoxy up, making sure it is level, making sure I have an even coat. You can feel it. And if I have excess on my glove, that is going back in my cup. I am taking off the epoxy. If you put too much epoxy, that's where you can deal with micro bubbles because your micro bubbles have no way to escape. So the common amount is 1/8 of an inch. That is what you want your epoxy coat to be, but that's kind of hard to measure from my eyesight. So I just keep going from the top to the bottom to make sure it is thin enough for me, and then I let it spin out. We're going to go over to the next one, over epoxy. I'm going to let this one spin, and then once I'm done epoxying both of them, I am going to torch both of them with a propane torch. So let's get into epoxying over the epoxy. I know this is mostly rambling, but I mixed up about 50 ml, like I said in the beginning. Now I am going to put the remainder of my epoxy over this epoxy coat. Now, once I have my glitter covered and I'm epoxying, I sand between each coat to make sure that my epoxy adheres correctly. This may be confusing, but we're going to go back to the glitter tumbler. If my first coat over that glitter is rough, I am not sanding. I am going directly in to a second coat to make sure that my epoxy is smooth, so I do not ruin my glitter by sanding over. That's why it's so important to epoxy your glitter until smooth and then go in and sand. Now, back to the handled tumbler. Once I get my handle thinly coated with the epoxy, now we are going to apply the remainder. I know you can see all those micro bubbles, but I'm telling you, these micro bubbles will not be there when this coat is finished. I don't worry about micro bubbles at all. Because if you're putting on the correct amount of epoxy, you don't have to worry about the bubbles. They're going to release. So same thing. I'm going to go from the bottom to the top. Bottom to the top. I'm going to make sure that my bottom is covered completely, and then I am going to swipe my finger bottom to the top all the way around quite a few times to make sure that my epoxy coat is even and I am taking off the excess epoxy. I know you can't really see that because I have the cup off to the side because with the handle I kind of have to epoxy it sideways, but as I am brushing my finger up, if I have epoxy on my glove finger, I am putting that back in my cup. That is me removing the excess epoxy. It's always been hard for me to know if it's 1/8 of an inch or if it's the right amount. So, like I said, I just keep swiping my finger and swiping my finger over and over and over until I am no longer taking epoxy off of my glove. I really hope that makes sense. Lots of practice. Lots of practice. I've had plenty of thick cups. But going on the 3rd year, trying different things, my cups are pretty thin. And I do 5 to 6 coats per cup. I will always do 2 coats of epoxy over raw glitter. And then I will do a coat of epoxy over my decals, over my striping, and then 2 final coats, and I am sanding in between all of my epoxy coats after I glitter. I know this is a lot, and I know I'm all over the place, but some people get it. Some people get it. In my Book of Faces group, the Glitter Bitches Craft Society, me and a couple of my buddies, my admins, are going to be doing an epoxy like 101 live here in the near future, going over the risk of epoxy The good, the bad, the ugly. Risk, everything. We're going to be going over it from the PPE to the SDS, from having just a Q&A, because so many people jump into this craft without fully doing their research. And epoxy, messing with epoxy is so freaking important, because if you don't know what you're doing and you gift one of these cups or sell one of these tumblers and it is not fully cured, you can hurt someone. And I'm just staying there. We're not going any further. Told y'all this was going to be a lot of rambling. Now that I have my epoxy on my tumblers, I have the coats the way I want it, I am going in with my Propane Torch. I used to use butane. Some will tell you you can use butane. Butane does not get hot enough for the epoxy. That is fact. Butane does not get hot enough for the epoxy. The propane is what is recommended to use for epoxy. I hit it 1 or 2 rotations and that is it, because if you use too much heat, you can cause waves. You can cause ripples. And there it is. I will let this spin depending if it is fast set for a couple hours or if it is a regular set for 8 to 12 hours. Like I said, all of that can be found on the epoxy bottles that you are using. Epoxy safety is so important. So important. So if you take any bit of advice from me, when you are testing out epoxy, buy small kits, look over the website, the description, the SDS sheet. This is a cool ass craft. It is a cool ass business, but so many do it carelessly. I hope this helps. Like I said, I hope y'all understand it. This is a little bonus. I usually only post 1 tutorial a week, but we got a lot of newbies. And I enjoy sharing my knowledge and teaching. So like I said, stay tuned for the Epoxy Live and the Craft Society group coming here soon. But just know your risks when messing with epoxy. All right, bitches. Thanks for watching. Let's get it.